In the annals of role-playing game history, few stories have carved themselves as deeply into the collective memory as the tale of a Dark Knight's redemption. This is the complete story of Final Fantasy IV, a narrative that transformed what players expected from video game storytelling, weaving themes of identity, sacrifice, and forgiveness into an epic that spans two worlds and challenges the very nature of what it means to be a hero. Long before complex character arcs became standard fare in interactive entertainment, this story dared to ask uncomfortable questions about loyalty, duty, and the cost of blind obedience to authority. What unfolds is a journey from darkness into light, not through simple heroic triumph, but through painful self-examination and the courage to change when confronted with the weight of one's own actions. Our story begins not with a hero, but with doubt. Above the quiet town of Mysidia, a fleet of airships cuts through the night sky, their dark silhouettes stark against the stars. These are the Red Wings, the elite aerial force of the Kingdom of Baron, and they have come bearing fire and steel. The flagship carries Cecil Harvey, Lord Captain of this fearsome armada, a dark knight whose skill with the sword is matched only by his growing unease with the orders he has been given. The mission is simple in its brutality. Seize the water crystal from the mages of Mysidia and destroy any who stand in opposition. What should have been a military engagement against prepared defenders instead becomes something far more troubling. The people of Mysidia offer no resistance. They are scholars, healers, students of the arcane arts who have devoted their lives to understanding magic in its purest forms. They do not raise weapons or summon destructive spells. They simply watch as Baron's soldiers storm through their streets, breaking into their sacred chamber and taking the crystal by force. Cecil executes his orders with the precision expected of Baron's finest warrior, but something fundamental has broken inside him during this raid. As the Red Wings soar back toward Baron, their prize secured in the cargo hold, Cecil stands alone on the deck of his flagship, watching Mysidia shrink into the distance. Around him, his soldiers celebrate their easy victory, but their captain cannot share their enthusiasm. The faces of Mysidia's people haunt him, their expressions not of hatred or defiance, but of profound sadness and disappointment. They looked at him not as an enemy to be fought, but as someone who had chosen to become a weapon for purposes he did not understand. The doubt that has been growing in Cecil's heart for weeks finally crystallizes into a question he can no longer ignore. Why is Baron doing this? What purpose justifies attacking peaceful communities and stealing their sacred relics? When the Red Wings return to Baron Castle, Cecil's unease has become impossible to hide. His men notice their captain's distraction, the way his responses come slowly, his gaze distant even as they make their report. But it is in the throne room, standing before the King of Baron, that Cecil's doubts finally find voice. The king sits upon his throne, a figure of absolute authority whose word is law throughout the kingdom, and Cecil has served him faithfully since childhood. Baron raised Cecil, trained him, gave him purpose and position. Everything he is, he owes to this kingdom and this king. Yet as he presents the water crystal, Cecil cannot stop himself from asking the question that has been burning in his mind. Why must they attack those who offer no threat? What danger do these crystals pose that requires such aggression? Why must Baron, the most powerful military force in the world, resort to terrorizing scholars and stealing sacred artifacts? The king's response is not what Cecil expects. There is no reasoned explanation, no revelation of some greater threat that justifies their actions. Instead, there is only anger at being questioned, outrage that a mere soldier would dare to doubt his sovereign's wisdom. The king accuses Cecil of disloyalty, of ingratitude for everything Baron has provided. How dare he question orders after being raised from nothing to captain the Red Wings? How dare he presume to understand the complex political necessities that govern kingdoms? Cecil tries to explain that his doubt comes from loyalty, from a desire to understand so he can serve more effectively. But his words only deepen the king's fury. In a moment that will change the course of Cecil's life and ultimately the fate of the world, the king strips him of his command. Cecil Harvey, Lord Captain of the Red Wings, the Dark Knight who has served Baron faithfully for years, is demoted and reassigned to a menial task beneath his station. He is to travel to the village of Mist in the valley northwest of Baron, deliver a package to the summoners who live there, and kill the phantom beast that guards the Misty Valley. It is busy work, an insulting assignment designed to humble a soldier who has forgotten his place. Standing nearby during this humiliation is Kain Highwind, commander of Baron's elite dragoon knights, and Cecil's closest friend since childhood. Kain has his own complicated relationship with Cecil, admiration mixed with envy, loyalty strained by competition for recognition and for the affections of Rosa, the white mage both men care for. But seeing his friend stripped of rank and dignity for the crime of asking reasonable questions, Kain steps forward to defend Cecil. His intervention only serves to implicate himself in Cecil's perceived disloyalty. The king, his patience exhausted, orders Kain to accompany Cecil on this mission to Mist. Two of Baron's finest warriors are to play delivery boys, and the message is clear. Question the crown, and you will be reminded of your place in the hierarchy. Cecil leaves Baron Castle in a daze, his world upended in the space of a single audience. Everything he believed about his service, about Baron's righteousness and the justness of their cause, has been called into question. The king's reaction suggests that there are no good answers to Cecil's questions, or at least none that the king is willing to share. As Cecil prepares for the journey to Mist, he is approached by Rosa Farrell, a white mage who has known both Cecil and Kain since they were children, training together in Baron's military academy. Rosa loves Cecil, though their duties often keep them apart, and she can see the turmoil written across his face. She begs him to be careful, to return safely, and though Cecil tries to reassure her, they both understand that something has fundamentally changed. The certainty that once guided Cecil's actions has been replaced by doubt, and he goes into the Mist not as Baron's proud Dark Knight, but as a man questioning everything he has ever known about himself and his purpose. The journey to Mist takes Cecil and Kain through a cave system shrouded in supernatural fog that disorients travelers and makes navigation nearly impossible. As they venture deeper into the cave, a voice echoes through the mist, urgent and desperate, commanding them to turn back, to leave this place and return to Baron. But Cecil and Kain press forward, driven by duty and the hope that completing this mission might restore them to the king's favor. The voice grows more insistent, more panicked, and when they finally reach the cave's heart, they discover its source. The mist dragon materializes before them, a creature of vapor and magic, guardian of the valley and protector of the summoners who live beyond. This is the phantom beast the king ordered them to destroy. The dragon attacks, and Cecil and Kain have no choice but to defend themselves. The battle is fierce, the dragon wielding primal magic that tests even their considerable skills. But ultimately, the warriors of Baron prevail. The mist dragon falls, its form dissolving back into the fog from which it was born, and the path forward opens. Cecil and Kain emerge from the cave into the village of Mist, a small community nestled in the valley where summoners practice their ancient art. These are people who can call forth powerful creatures called eidolons to fight alongside them, maintaining bonds with these beings through mutual respect and spiritual connection. The village seems peaceful, almost serene in the perpetual twilight, created by the valley's ever-present mist. But as Cecil and Kain approach, intending to deliver their package and complete their mission, something terrible happens. The package they carry, an innocuous ring that neither questioned during their journey, suddenly activates. It is a bomb ring, a device containing concentrated fire elementals, and it detonates with devastating force. Flames erupt throughout the village, consuming buildings and people with horrifying speed. The summoners, caught completely unprepared, have no defense against this sudden assault. In moments, the village of Mist is transformed from peaceful home to burning graveyard. Cecil and Kain stand frozen in horror, realizing too late the true nature of their mission. They were never meant to simply deliver a package. They were used as unwitting weapons to destroy this village, to eliminate the summoners who lived here. The king of Baron played them for fools, sending his demoted captain to commit genocide while believing he was performing a routine task. The revelation is devastating, but there is no time to process this betrayal. From the flames emerges a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, her clothes singed and her face streaked with tears and soot. She runs toward a figure lying motionless on the ground, a woman who summoned the mist dragon to protect the village, the girl's mother. And Cecil understands with sickening clarity that when they killed the dragon in the cave, they killed this woman too. The bond between summoner and eidolon is so profound that when one falls, the other follows. They have murdered this child's mother. The girl's name is Rydia, and her grief transforms instantly into rage. She raises her small hands towards Cecil and Kain, and the earth itself responds to her anguish. The ground buckles and splits, a massive earthquake tearing through the valley as Rydia unconsciously channels the power of Titan, the earth eidolon. Rocks fall from the cliffs surrounding them, the very land rebelling against the men who brought destruction to this peaceful place. Cecil and Kain are separated by the chaos, massive fissures opening between them, and when the shaking finally stops, Cecil finds himself alone with Rydia, the child who has every right to hate him beyond measure. She collapses from the exertion of summoning such power, her small body overwhelmed by the magic she channeled in her desperation and fury. Cecil approaches the unconscious child, his mind reeling from everything that has happened. He came to Mist as a soldier following orders, and through that blind obedience, he has become a murderer. The king used him to commit an atrocity, and Cecil allowed himself to be used because he did not question, did not refuse, did not think beyond his duty to the crown. Looking down at Rydia, at this child orphaned by his actions, Cecil makes a choice that will define the rest of his journey. He cannot undo what has been done. He cannot bring back Rydia's mother or restore the village that burned. But he can at least ensure that this girl survives. He can try, however inadequately, to atone for what he has done. Cecil gathers Rydia in his arms and begins the long walk toward the nearest town, carrying the weight of his sins and the child who represents everything he has destroyed. The journey to Kaipo, an oasis town in the desert beyond the valley, takes days. Rydia drifts in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to scream at Cecil, to demand he stay away from her, to curse him for what he has done. Cecil endures her hatred because he deserves it, because her words are true and his guilt is absolute. He speaks to her gently when she is calm enough to listen. trying to explain that he did not know what the ring would do, that he was deceived just as the village was deceived. But these explanations ring hollow even to his own ears. Ignorance is not innocence, and the crime remains the same regardless of intent. When they finally reach Kaipo, Cecil secures a room at the inn and puts Rydia to bed, hoping that rest and safety might begin to heal the trauma that he inflicted upon her. That night, as Rydia sleeps, Baron soldiers arrive at the inn. They have been tracking Cecil, ordered to find him and bring him back to answer for his failure to complete his mission properly. The soldiers do not know about the bomb ring or the true nature of what happened at Mist. They only know that their former captain has disappeared with a child from the destroyed village, and the king wants both of them returned to Baron. The soldiers burst into the room where Rydia sleeps, weapons drawn, and their intentions are clear. They will take the girl back to Baron, where whatever experiments or interrogations the king has planned for her will take place. Cecil places himself between the soldiers and Rydia's bed. These are men he once commanded, colleagues he trained alongside, but he will not allow them to harm this child. The battle is brief and brutal. Cecil's skills as a dark knight, the very abilities that made him valuable to Baron's military, are now turned against his former kingdom. The soldiers fall, and Cecil realizes with finality that there is no going back. He has chosen his path, and it leads away from Baron, away from everything he once knew, towards some uncertain future where perhaps he can become something better than what he was. Rydia wakes during the fight, witnesses Cecil defending her against Baron's soldiers, and something shifts in her perception. This man, this dark knight who killed her mother, just fought against his own people to protect her. The contradiction confuses her young mind, makes her hatred waver into something more complex. When Cecil explains what happened, Rydia begins to understand that she and Cecil are both victims of Baron's king, both manipulated and hurt by the same cruel authority. It does not erase what was done, but it creates a foundation for something other than pure hatred. Tentatively, still frightened and grieving, Rydia agrees to travel with Cecil. She has nowhere else to go, no family remaining, no village to return to. At least with Cecil, she might find purpose in opposing the kingdom that destroyed everything she loved. The next morning, Cecil explores Kaipo and makes a discovery that drives home how small the world truly is and how interconnected their fates have become. In one of the town's houses, tended by an elderly couple, lies Rosa Farrell, the white mage, who begged Cecil to return safely from his mission to Mist. Rosa fell ill with desert fever, a disease common in arid regions that requires a specific cure, a sand pearl, which can only be found in the depths of the antlion's nest. Rosa tracked Cecil to Kaipo, desperate to know he was safe after hearing rumors of trouble at Mist, but collapsed before she could find him. Now she lies in fevered delirium, and Cecil understands that his journey just became more urgent. He must find the sand pearl, but the Antlion's nest lies in the kingdom of Damshian, requiring them to travel through dangerous underground waterways. The journey through the waterways brings Cecil and Rydia into contact with Tella, an elderly sage whose power once made him legendary among mages. Age and a mysterious accident have stolen most of Tella's magical knowledge, leaving him frustrated and diminished, a shadow of what he once was. But his pride remains intact, and he is on a quest of his own. His daughter Anna eloped with a bard against Tella's wishes, and the old man is traveling to Damshian to confront this bard and bring his daughter home. Tella disapproves of this match, considers the bard unworthy of his daughter, and intends to end this foolish romance by force if necessary. Cecil and Rydia, heading in the same direction, agree to travel with Teller. The old sage's magic, even diminished, proves valuable as they battle through the creatures infesting the waterways. Their path is blocked by the Octomammoth, a massive creature that guards the passage to Damsion. The beast's 8 tentacles make it a formidable opponent, but working together, Cecil, Rydia, and Teller manage to defeat it. They emerge from the waterways and approach Damsion Castle. But something is terribly wrong. Smoke rises from the castle towers, and debris litters the courtyard. They arrive to find the aftermath of the Red Wings' assault, the elite force Cecil once commanded, having already attacked Damsion and stolen the fire crystal. The same pattern that began at Mysidia is repeating here. Barons' military might crushing peaceful kingdoms and seizing their crystals. The Red Wings were commanded by someone new, a mysterious armored figure whose power far exceeds that of any normal soldier. His name is Golbez, and his presence marks the beginning of a darkness that extends far beyond Baron's king and his ambitions. Inside Damsion Castle, they find devastation. Most of the castle's defenders are dead or dying, and the fire crystal is gone. In the throne room, they discover Teller's daughter Anna, wounded and fading fast. The bard she eloped with kneels beside her, and Cecil recognizes him as Prince Edward Chris von Meur, the heir to Damsion's throne. Edward is not merely a bard, but royalty, who disguised himself to travel freely and fell genuinely in love with Teller's daughter. Anna used her own body to shield Edward from the Red Wing's arrows during the attack, taking wounds meant for him. As Teller cradles his dying daughter, she begs him to forgive her for running away, to understand that she truly loved Edward, to give them his blessing even now at the end. Teller's anger crumbles in the face of his daughter's death. He holds her as she passes, and his grief transforms into something harder and colder. He will have vengeance against Golbez for killing Anna. Nothing else matters now except making the man responsible pay for this loss. Teller storms off into the desert, determined to track down Golbez and destroy him regardless of the cost. Cecil tries to stop him, warns him that revenge will only lead to more death, but Teller is beyond reason. His daughter is dead, and someone must answer for it. Edward collapses beside Anna's body, consumed by guilt and grief. He blames himself for her death, for being too weak to protect her, for allowing her to die in his place. Cecil and Rydia try to rouse him, to make him see that Anna's sacrifice will be meaningless if he gives up now. Rosa is dying in Kaipo, and they need Edward's help to reach the Antlion's nest. Only members of Damsion's royal family know the secret entrance to the nest, and only they can safely retrieve the sand pearls that form there. Rydia, speaking from her own experience of loss, tells Edward bluntly that crying will not bring Anna back, that she has lost everything too, and wallowing in grief helps no one. Her harsh words, coming from a child who watched her mother die, finally penetrate Edward's despair. He agrees to help them, understanding that he can honor Anna's memory by helping others, by being strong enough to do what she would have wanted. The three of them venture into the Antlion's lair, a complex network of underground chambers where the massive insect makes its home. Edward knows the passages his family has used for generations to harvest the precious pearls without disturbing the creature. But something has agitated the antlion, perhaps vibrations from the recent attacks, or simply the presence of intruders in its domain. The creature emerges from the sand and attacks them, its powerful mandibles and burrowing abilities making it a dangerous opponent. But Cecil's sword, Rydia's growing magical powers and Edward's supporting abilities combine to bring the creature down. They retrieve several sand pearls from the beast nest and rush back to Kaipo. Cecil administers the pearl to Rosa, and her fever breaks almost immediately. The cure works, and Rosa wakes to find Cecil watching over her with a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. She is glad he is safe, but she can see the weight he carries, the way something fundamental has changed in him since he left Baron. Cecil tells her everything. Mist, Rydia, the king's betrayal, his break with Baron. Rosa listens and makes her choice. She will travel with them to Fabul, the mountain kingdom where the wind crystal is kept. If Baron is truly collecting crystals by force, then Fabul will be their next target, and the Yarm people there deserve warning. The journey to Fabul takes them across Mount Hobbs, a treacherous mountain path plagued by monsters and blocked at a crucial point by a massive wall of ice. Only fire magic can melt this obstruction, and only Rydia among their party can cast such spells. But when they reach the ice wall and Cecil asks Rydia to melt it, she freezes. The trauma of watching her village burn is too fresh, too overwhelming. Fire destroyed everything she loved, killed her mother and her neighbors, reduced her entire world to ashes. The thought of summoning flames herself, of wielding the element that caused such devastation, triggers a panic attack that leaves her unable to act. Rosa kneels beside the child, speaking gently but firmly. She understands Rydia's fear, but more people will die if they cannot reach Fabul in time to warn them. Fire is not inherently evil. It is simply a tool, and Rydia can choose to use it to protect rather than destroy. With Rosa's encouragement and the knowledge that lives depend on her overcoming this fear, Rydia finally casts fire, melting the ice and opening the path forward. Further up Mount Hobbs, they encounter Yangfang Leiden, a master monk and commander of Fabul's military forces. Yang is surrounded by monsters sent by Golbez, and Cecil's party helps him fight through the ambush. Yang confirms their fears. Golbez is indeed targeting Fabul next, and Baron's forces are massing for an assault on the mountain kingdom. Yang hurries ahead to warn his king and prepare the defenses, while Cecil and his companions follow as quickly as they can. They arrive at Fabul to find the kingdom's soldiers preparing for siege. The king of Fabul is skeptical when Yang vouches for Cecil, questioning why they should trust a dark knight who once led Baron's Red Wings. But Yang's word carries weight, and the threat is too immediate to turn away potential allies. Cecil, Rosa, Edward, and Rydia are given positions to help defend Fabul. Rosa and Rydia are assigned to the infirmary to help heal wounded soldiers, while Cecil and the fighters take positions along the walls to repel Baron's assault. The Battle of Fabul is brutal and desperate. Wave after wave of Baron's soldiers attack the castle, and Cecil finds himself fighting against men he once commanded, former comrades who now see him as a traitor. The defense holds through several assaults, but Baron's forces are relentless, and slowly the defenders are pushed back through the castle's halls toward the crystal chamber. In the final stand before the wind crystal, Cecil faces someone he never expected to see as an enemy. Kain Highwind stands before him, no longer wearing the colors of Baron, but clad in new armor that marks him as one of Golbez's personal guard. Kain's eyes are cold, distant, and when Cecil tries to reach him to appeal to their friendship, Kain responds with violence. The two childhood friends duel in the crystal chamber, and Cecil discovers with horror that he cannot defeat Kain. The dragoon's skills have always been formidable, but now there is something different about him, a power and ruthlessness that was not there before. Kain defeats Cecil, leaving him wounded on the floor. And then Golbez himself enters the chamber. Golbez moves like a force of nature, his magic overwhelming anyone who tries to resist. He incapacitates Yang, Edward, and anyone else who stands between him and the wind crystal with contemptuous ease. His power is on a level that none of them have experienced before, and they are helpless to stop him. But Golbez is not here merely to take the crystal. He has another objective, and he turns his attention to Rosa. With a gesture, Golbez binds Rosa in magical chains and announces his terms. Cecil will exchange the earth crystal for Rosa's life. Cecil must travel to the Tower of Zot and bring the earth crystal if he ever wants to see Rosa alive again. Before Cecil can respond, before he can even process this new nightmare, Kain steps forward and claims the wind crystal. The dragoon who fought beside Cecil, who defended him before the king, has become Golbez's lieutenant. Kain and Golbez vanish with both Rosa and the crystal, leaving Cecil and his companions in the ruins of their failed defense. The next morning, the king of Fabul offers Cecil his fastest ship to pursue Golbez. It is a generous gesture from a man who has lost his crystal, but recognizes that Cecil at least tried to prevent it. The party boards the ship and sets sail toward Baron, hoping to find some way to infiltrate the kingdom and secure the earth crystal that Golbez demanded as Rosa's ransom. But they never reach barren shores. Midway through the voyage, the ocean itself rises against them. Leviathan, the massive serpent Eidolon who rules the seas, emerges from the depths and attacks the ship. The creature's power is overwhelming. Waves crashing over the deck, tentacles smashing through the hull. The ship begins to break apart, and everyone is thrown into the churning waters. Cecil catches a glimpse of Rydia, her small form pulled under by the current, and then Leviathan's massive mouth opens and swallows her whole. Cecil tries to swim after her, tries to reach the child he swore to protect, but the ocean pulls him under, and consciousness fades into darkness. Cecil wakes on a beach, coughing up seawater and disoriented. He is alone, separated from his companions, with no idea where the others might have washed ashore, or if they even survived. The beach is near Mysidia, the town where this all began, where Cecil stole the water crystal and set into motion the chain of events that led to this moment. The people of Mysidia recognize him instantly, and their reception is hostile. Some call for his execution, others for imprisonment, but the elder of Mysidia, the leader of the mages, intervenes. The elder has seen something in his visions, some potential in Cecil that makes killing him now a waste. Instead, he offers Cecil a chance at redemption that seems impossible. If Cecil truly regrets his actions, if he genuinely wishes to atone for the harm he has caused, then he must climb Mount Ordeals and prove himself worthy. The mountain is a sacred place, where light and darkness are tested, where the true nature of a person's heart is revealed. If Cecil can reach the summit and return, perhaps he can become something other than what Baron made him. Cecil accepts this challenge because he has nothing else left. His friends are scattered or captured. Rosa is hostage to Golbez's demands. Rydia is most likely dead, and he himself is lost in every sense of the word. Mount Ordeals represents a chance to become someone worthy of the trust that others have placed in him. Someone capable of protecting those he cares about rather than being used as a weapon against them. He begins the ascent, and the mountain immediately tests him. The slopes are crawling with undead creatures, zombies and skeletons and spirits, and Cecil's dark sword is nearly useless against them. The very abilities that made him Baron's greatest warrior are now a liability. His dark powers actually heal the undead instead of harming them, and he must rely on his physical strength alone to fight through battles that should be simple for someone of his skill. Higher on the mountain, Cecil encounters Teller again. The old sage has been training here, pushing himself to his limits, trying to remember the ultimate destructive spell, Meteor. Teller believes that only with this legendary magic can he hope to defeat Golbez and avenge Anna's death. The sage has succeeded in his training. The spell returned to his memory through sheer determination and rage, but he is dying from the effort. The human body was not meant to channel such power, and Teller has paid for Meteor's return with his own life force. He warns Cecil that Golbez is more than he seems, that there is something deeply wrong about the armored figure's power. Then Teller descends the mountain to seek his vengeance, knowing he will not survive the confrontation, but no longer caring about anything beyond making Golbez pay. Cecil continues climbing, and near the summit, he encounters Scarmiglione, the first of Golbez's 4 archfiends of the elements. Scarmiglione is the blighted despot, master of earth and death, a hideous creature who commands the undead and whose very presence rots the ground beneath his feet. He has been stationed here to ensure that anyone attempting Mount Ordeals never reaches the summit, to maintain the mountain as an impassable barrier. The battle with Scarmiglione is Cecil's greatest challenge yet. The creature's powers perfectly suited to countering a Dark Knight's abilities. But Cecil fights not with darkness now, but with determination born of desperation. When Scarmiglione falls the first time, the creature reveals its true form, an even more monstrous shape that rises from the corpse of its previous body. Cecil barely survives this second battle, but survive he does, and Scarmiglione plummets from the mountain, defeated. At the summit of Mount Ordeals, Cecil finds a chamber bathed in ethereal light. Here, in this place where the boundary between physical and spiritual is thin, he must face himself. A figure emerges from the light, wearing Cecil's face, but made entirely of shadow. This is Cecil's darkness given form. Every evil he has committed, every order he followed without question, every life he took in barren service. The shadow attacks, and Cecil raises his sword to defend himself. But something stops him. He looks at this manifestation of everything dark within him, and he realizes that he cannot defeat it through combat. Violence and strength are the tools of his past, the skills that made him Baron's weapon. To move forward, to become something better, he must reject that approach entirely. Cecil lowers his sword and refuses to fight. He accepts the darkness as part of himself, acknowledges his guilt without letting it destroy him, and chooses to move forward despite the weight of his sins. The shadow hesitates, its form flickering, and then it speaks with Cecil's voice. It asks why he should be forgiven, what right he has to redemption when so many died by his hand. Cecil has no grand answer, no justification for his past actions. He can only say that he will try to be better, that he will spend the rest of his life atoning for what he has done, and that he refuses to let guilt paralyze him into inaction when there are still people who need his protection. The shadow considers this, and then it begins to dissolve, not destroyed but integrated, becoming part of Cecil rather than a separate entity he must battle. Light floods the chamber, pure and overwhelming, and Cecil's dark armor cracks and falls away. When the light fades, Cecil Harvey stands transformed. He is no longer a dark knight, but a paladin, a warrior of light who wields holy powers that can heal as well as harm. His appearance has changed, the black armor replaced by silver, but more importantly, his heart has changed. He has chosen light over darkness, atonement over despair, and though the guilt remains, it no longer defines him. Cecil descends Mount Ordeals to find Palom and Porom waiting at the base, twin mages sent by the elder of Mysidia to accompany him on his journey. The twins are young, barely older than Rydia, gifted with powerful black and white magic respectively, but still learning to control their considerable talents. They bicker constantly in the way of siblings, Palom boastful about his destructive spells, while Porom chides him for his recklessness, but beneath the quarreling is genuine affection and loyalty. The elder has seen in his visions that Cecil will need their help, that his path forward requires allies who can complement his new abilities as a paladin. Together, the three of them set out for Baron, determined to infiltrate the kingdom, secure the Earth Crystal, and rescue Rosa from Golbez's clutches. They enter Baron through secret passages that Palom and Porom know from their previous visits to the kingdom. Baron Castle is heavily guarded, but the twins guide Cecil through underground waterways that bypass the main defenses. As they navigate the castle's lower levels, Cecil is struck by how much has changed in the short time since his exile. The guards speak in hushed tones about the king's strange behavior, how he has become reclusive and paranoid, issuing orders that make no sense even to his most loyal soldiers. Some whisper that the king is not himself anymore, that something happened after Golbez arrived that transformed Baron's ruler into someone they no longer recognize. The deeper they penetrate into the castle, the more Cecil's unease grows. This is the place where he was raised, where he trained and served and built his identity as Baron's sword. Every corridor holds memories, every room echoes with ghosts of his past. But now he walks these halls as an intruder, using stealth and subterfuge to avoid the very guards he once commanded. When they finally reach the throne room, they find it empty, save for one figure. The King of Baron sits upon his throne, but there is something profoundly wrong about the scene. The king's posture is too rigid, his movements too mechanical, and when he speaks, his voice carries a hollow quality that sends chills down Cecil's spine. Cecil demands to know what happened to Baron, why the kingdom has begun this campaign of crystal theft and conquest. The king's response is mocking laughter, and then his form begins to shift and flow. The figure on the throne is not the king at all, but Cagnazzo, the second of Golbez's 4 arch-fiends, the drowned king who commands water and ice. Cagnazzo reveals that he has been impersonating the King of Baron for weeks, perhaps months, issuing orders in the king's name and steering the kingdom toward Golbez's purposes. The real king is imprisoned somewhere in the castle, powerless to stop his kingdom from being used as a tool for conquest. Cagnazzo attacks, his mastery over water making him a formidable opponent in the enclosed throne room. He floods the chamber, summons waves to batter his enemies, and retreats into a protective shell when pressed too hard. The battle is desperate, but Cecil's new holy powers prove effective against the Archfiend's elemental magic. When Cagnazzo falls, the throne room's enchantments break, revealing passages that were hidden while the Archfiend maintained his illusion. They find the real King of Baron in a sealed chamber, weak from imprisonment but alive. The king is horrified to learn how his kingdom has been manipulated, how his name has been used to justify atrocities. He gives Cecil his blessing to pursue Golbez and stop whatever plans the armored villain has for the crystals. But there is no time for lengthy reconciliation or planning. Alarms sound throughout the castle as Cagnazzo's death triggers security protocols. Guards flood the corridors, and Cecil realizes they are trapped with no clear path to escape. Palom and Porom exchange a look, some unspoken communication passing between the twins, and then they act before anyone can stop them. The twins position themselves at the entrance to the throne room and begin casting a spell in unison, their magic intertwining into something far more powerful than either could produce alone. They are casting Petrify, but directing it at themselves, using their own bodies as the catalyst for a spell that will seal the passage and prevent pursuit. Cecil screams for them to stop, lunges toward them to break their concentration, but Rosa holds him back. The twins know what they are doing, and interfering now would waste their sacrifice. Palom and Porom turn to stone, their young faces frozen in expressions of determination, their bodies forming an impenetrable barrier across the doorway. Guards crash against the petrified twins, but cannot break through or move them, buying Cecil and his companions the time they need to escape through hidden passages. The escape from Barren Castle is a blur of grief and rage. Palom and Porom, children who should have had full lives ahead of them, gave themselves to buy time for a mission they believed in. Cecil barely knows them, has travelled with them for only days, but their sacrifice cuts deep. How many more will die before this is finished? How many more children will pay the price for Golbez's ambitions and the greed of those who seek the crystals? These questions haunt Cecil as they flee Barren and make their way toward the Tower of Zot, the flying fortress where Golbez is holding Rosa hostage. Along the way, they encounter an unexpected ally. Edward, the Prince of Damchin, has been recovering from his injuries and gathering information about Golbez's operations. He cannot accompany them to the tower due to his wounds, but he can provide intelligence and supplies that will help them survive what comes next. Edward's grief over Anna has transformed into quiet determination, and though he cannot fight, he can contribute in other ways. His support reminds Cecil that resistance takes many forms, that not every hero wields a sword. The Tower of Zot floats in the sky above Barren, a massive structure held aloft by magic and serving as Golbez's mobile command center. Reaching it requires another airship, which they secure through a combination of stealth and the assistance of Barren's citizens who have grown disillusioned with their kingdom's actions under the false king's rule. The airship brings them to the tower's entrance, and they begin the ascent through a gauntlet of monsters and magical traps. The tower's interior is a testament to Golbez's power, reality itself bent and twisted by his will, corridors that should not connect somehow leading to distant chambers, staircases that defy geometry climbing toward the upper levels. The higher they climb, the more oppressive the atmosphere becomes, magic saturating the air until every breath tastes of ozone and power. Near the tower's summit, they encounter Barbaricia, the third archfiend, the Empress of the Winds. She is beautiful and terrible, her control over air and storm making her nearly untouchable as she dances through the battle on currents of wind. Barbaricia toys with them, her attacks devastating when they connect, but her arrogance making her careless. She underestimates Cecil's holy powers and the combination of abilities his party has developed through their trials. When they finally bring her down, she falls with a scream that echoes through the tower like a dying gale, and the path to the tower's peak opens before them. In the highest chamber of the Tower of Zot, Rosa hangs suspended in magical chains, unconscious but alive. Golbez waits nearby, and beside him stands Kain, the dragoon's face still wearing that distant, controlled expression that suggests his will is not entirely his own. Cecil demands Rosa's release, offering to surrender the Earth Crystal as promised, but Golbez is no longer interested in bargains. He has most of the crystals already, and he will take the Earth Crystal by force rather than through exchange. Golbez attacks, his dark magic overwhelming in its intensity, far beyond anything Cecil has faced before. The battle seems hopeless until an unexpected voice joins the fray. Teller appears, having tracked Golbez to this tower, his body already failing but his determination absolute. The old sage unleashes Meteor, the ultimate destructive spell, channeling power that tears at the fabric of reality itself. The chamber shakes as massive stones materialize and crash down upon Golbez with apocalyptic force. But when the dust clears, Golbez still stands, damaged, his armor cracked and his movements pained, but alive and functional. Telar collapses, his life force completely spent in casting Meteor, and he dies there on the tower's floor, his last words a warning to Cecil that Golbez's power is beyond anything natural, that something about the armored figure is fundamentally wrong. Even as Telar's spirit departs, Golbez prepares to finish what the sage started, to kill Cecil and take the Earth Crystal. But something stops him. Golbez staggers, clutching his head as if in pain, and a voice seems to speak through him, a second presence commanding him to retreat, to not waste time fighting when there are still crystals to be collected. Golbez and Kain vanish in a flash of dark magic, teleporting away and leaving Cecil victorious but confused. What could cause someone as powerful as Golbez to retreat? What voice could command such a being? Cecil frees Rosa from her chains, and their reunion is bittersweet. She is alive, which is everything Cecil hoped for, but the cost continues to mount. Teller is dead, Palom and Porom are stone statues, and Rydia is gone, swallowed by Leviathan. As they leave the tower of Zot, Cecil carries Teller's body and the weight of another death he could not prevent. They return to Baron, hoping to find some way to restore the twins, but the Elder of Mysidia, who meets them there, has grim news. The spell Palom and Porom cast cannot be undone by conventional means. They would need the power of ancient magic, something beyond what current mages can accomplish. The twins' stone forms are taken to Mysidia to be preserved and honored, their sacrifice remembered even if it cannot be reversed. Cecil adds their faces to the collection of people he has failed to save, more names on a list that grows longer with each passing day. The next phase of their journey takes them beneath the surface world entirely. Golbez has shifted his attention to the underworld, a vast subterranean realm that exists below the planet's crust, where the dwarves have built their civilization around the heat of the world's core. The underworld has its own sun, a massive crystal of concentrated energy that hangs in the cavern sky and provides light and warmth to the lands below. This realm has remained isolated from the surface world for generations, its people developing their own culture and technology independent of the kingdoms above. But now Golbez has breached the barrier between worlds, and his forces are attacking the dwarven castle, seeking the crystals that the dwarves have kept safe in their underground vaults. Cecil and his party descend through underground passages and emerge into this subterranean world to find it already under siege. The dwarves are skilled engineers and warriors, their technology more advanced in some ways than anything on the surface, but they are unprepared for the scale and ferocity of Golbez's assault. The dwarven king, Gyot, welcomes Cecil as an ally, grateful for any help against the invaders. He explains that Golbez has constructed a massive tower called the Tower of Babil, a structure that extends from the underworld up through the planet's crust to the surface, serving as a conduit for troops and resources between the two realms. This tower is how Golbez has been moving his forces, and it represents a permanent breach in the separation that once kept surface and underworld distinct. But there is more troubling news. The tower is not merely a passage, but some kind of weapon, a device being constructed to achieve purposes that even Gyot does not fully understand. Golbez has been abducting dwarven engineers and forcing them to work on this project, and the tower grows more complete with each passing day. If they are to stop Golbez, they must infiltrate the Tower of Babil and sabotage whatever construction is taking place within. This mission becomes more urgent when they learn that Yang survived the Battle of Fabul and somehow ended up in the underworld. The monk was gravely injured and has been recovering in the dwarven infirmary, but he is ready to rejoin the fight. Yang's presence is a welcome reinforcement, his strength and leadership valuable additions to their growing resistance. The infiltration of the Tower of Babel takes them through multiple levels of the structure, battling Golbez's forces and dwarven prisoners forced to work as slave labor on the tower's construction. The prisoners are building something massive in the tower's heart, some kind of enormous mechanism whose purpose becomes clearer as they ascend. Golbez intends to create a superweapon, a device that can destroy entire kingdoms from a distance. At the tower's summit, they confront Dr. Lugay, a mad scientist in Golbez's employ, who oversees the tower's construction and conducts horrific experiments on prisoners. Lugay is brilliant and completely amoral, treating people as components to be used and discarded in pursuit of his mechanical obsessions. His laboratory is a chamber of horrors, failed experiments, and discarded test subjects, creating an atmosphere of casual cruelty. The battle with Lugay is unlike anything they have faced before. The scientist fights using modified versions of his own body, having replaced much of his organic tissue with mechanical components that grant him enhanced abilities. When his humanoid form is defeated, he merges with one of his mechanical creations to create a hybrid abomination that combines magic and technology in disturbing fusion. Cecil and his companions manage to destroy this final form, and with Lugay's death, they are able to sabotage the tower's control mechanisms. But their victory is incomplete. The tower's self-destruct sequence activates, and they must flee as the entire structure begins tearing itself apart. They race down through collapsing corridors, pursued by explosions and falling debris, barely making it to the bottom before the tower's upper levels crumble. But they are not out yet. The path back to the dwarven castle is cut off by falling rubble, and there seems to be no escape. Yang realizes that the only way to create a path is to trigger the remaining explosives in a controlled manner, but doing so requires someone to stay behind and manually detonate the charges. Before anyone can argue or propose alternatives, Yang makes his choice. He orders the others to run and begins setting the charges, his powerful monk training allowing him to survive in conditions that would kill anyone else long enough to complete the task. Cecil and the others flee as Yang fulfills his duty, the explosions behind them creating the opening they need, while simultaneously sealing Yang in the collapsing tower. They escape, but Yang does not follow, and when they look back, the Tower of Babel is a smoking ruin, its upper levels completely destroyed. Yang is gone, sacrificed to save his companions and prevent Golbez from using the tower as a weapon against the surface world. The destruction of the tower's upper levels is a significant blow to Golbez's plans, but it does not stop his conquest. While Cecil's party was dealing with the tower, Golbez himself attacked the dwarven castle directly and stole the dark crystals that the dwarves had been protecting. These crystals are counterparts to the light crystals that exist on the surface, and apparently Golbez needs both sets for whatever his ultimate plan entails. With most of both light and dark crystals in his possession, Golbez is approaching the completion of his objective. The dwarven king is devastated by this theft and by the news of Yang's sacrifice, but he provides Cecil with information about the final light crystal It is hidden in the sealed cave, a location protected by ancient magic that prevents anyone not chosen by the crystals themselves from entering. If Cecil can reach the sealed cave and secure that final crystal before Golbez, they might be able to use it as leverage, or at least prevent the completion of whatever Golbez is planning. The journey to the sealed cave takes them through some of the underworld's most dangerous territories, lands where the native monsters have grown powerful, feeding on the concentrated magical energy that seeps up from the planet's core. Along the way, they encounter a new ally. Edge, Geraldine, Prince of Eblan, is a ninja whose kingdom was recently destroyed by Golbez's forces. Eblan was a nation of shinobi and assassins, people who prize stealth and precision over brute force, and their castle was built near the Tower of Babil. When Golbez constructed his tower, he viewed Eblan as an inconvenient obstacle and simply destroyed it, scattering its people and killing many of its warriors. Edge survived and has been conducting a one-man guerrilla campaign against Golbez's forces, using his ninja skills to sabotage operations and rescue prisoners. He is brash and confident to the point of arrogance, but his skills are genuine, and his hatred of Golbez makes him a natural ally. Edge joins the party, bringing with him knowledge of the underworld's geography and combat abilities that complement their existing strengths. With Edge's help, they navigate to the sealed cave and solve the ancient puzzles that guard its entrance. The cave's interior is a maze of magical barriers and illusions, tests left by the ancients who first sealed this place to ensure that only the worthy could claim what lies within. At the cave's heart, they find the final light crystal, the earth crystal, resting on a pedestal and emanating power that makes the very air hum with potential. Cecil approaches to claim it, and for a moment it seems they have succeeded. But then Kain appears, materializing out of shadow, his dragoon lance leveled at Cecil's throat. The dragoon demands that Cecil surrender the crystal, and his voice carries a strange quality, as if he is speaking from very far away despite standing right before them. Cecil pleads with Kain to remember himself, to break free of whatever control Golbez has placed on him. For just a moment, Kain's eyes clear, confusion and horror flashing across his face as he recognizes what he has become. But then the control reasserts itself. Kain's expression goes blank again, and he takes the crystal by force, teleporting away before Cecil can stop him. The loss of the final crystal is devastating. Golbez now possesses all 8 crystals, 4 of light from the surface world and 4 of darkness from the underworld. Whatever he plans to do with them can now proceed without obstruction. Cecil and his party return to the dwarven castle feeling defeated, unsure what their next move should be when they have failed at every turn to prevent Golbez from achieving his objectives. But the Elder of Mysidia contacts them through magical communication, urgency clear in his voice even across the distance. The Elder has discovered something crucial through his research into ancient texts, something that might explain Golbez's actions and provide a path forward. Cecil must return to the surface, must travel to Mysidia, because what the Elder has learned changes everything they thought they knew about this conflict. The journey back to the surface world is tense. Everyone lost in their own thoughts about the friends they have lost and the failures that have accumulated. When they arrive in Mysidia, the Elder gathers all the town's mages together with Cecil's party for a revelation that seems impossible. The legend speaks of a second moon that once orbited this world, a celestial body inhabited by a race called the Lunarians. These beings possessed magic and technology far beyond anything humans achieved, and their very existence on the moon was a form of self-imposed exile. The Lunarians recognized that their power posed a threat to the younger races developing on the planet below, and so they placed themselves in suspended sleep, waiting for the day when humanity would evolve to a point where peaceful coexistence might be possible. The moon was hidden from observation through powerful magic, making it invisible to any who looked skyward, its presence forgotten over generations until it became merely myth. But the Elders' research suggests the legend is true, and more, that the crystals Golbez has been collecting are keys to reaching this hidden moon. With all 8 crystals in his possession, Golbez can summon the path to the Lunarian civilization and access whatever power or knowledge they left behind. The implications are staggering. This conflict has never been merely about conquering the surface world or controlling magical artifacts. Golbez is pursuing something far more ambitious, reaching for power that predates human civilization entirely. If the people of Mysidia are to help stop him, they must perform a ritual that their ancestors performed once before, in the distant past when the moon was last accessible. They must summon the lunar whale, a vessel capable of traveling through the void between world and moon, the only means of pursuing Golbez to wherever he has gone. The ritual requires every mage in Mysidia working in concert, their combined power focused through ancient wards and amplified by the town's magical infrastructure. Cecil watches as the mages form a circle around the harbour, chanting in unison, their magic building and intertwining until the very air glows with power. The ocean begins to churn, water flowing in patterns that defy natural currents, and then something massive rises from the depths. The lunar whale emerges, an enormous creature that is part living being and part vessel, ancient beyond measure and pulsing with its own internal magic. The whale is a legacy from the Lunarians themselves, left behind as a means for humans to reach them when the time was right. It responds to the mage's summoning, positioning itself at the harbour's edge, and a passage opens in its side, inviting Cecil and his companions aboard. The journey to the moon is unlike anything they have experienced. The lunar whale rises from the ocean and ascends through the sky, passing beyond the clouds into the thin air of the upper atmosphere. The world spreads out below them, continents and oceans visible as a vast tapestry of geography that shrinks as they climb higher. Then they pass through some barrier, a transition that feels like moving through water, and suddenly the hidden moon is visible above them. It is smaller than the familiar moon they have always seen, and its surface glows with a faint blue luminescence that suggests the presence of powerful magic. The lunar whale approaches this celestial body and descends toward its surface, coming to rest in a cratered landscape that seems utterly alien, despite sharing the same sky as their home world. The moon's surface is barren but not lifeless, and structures are visible in the distance, crystalline buildings that echo architectural styles from the surface, but incorporate elements that are distinctly other. They make their way toward the largest of these structures, a palace or temple of some kind, and inside they encounter Fusoya, one of the few Lunarians who has remained awake to watch over his sleeping people. Fusoya is ancient even by Lunarian standards, his magic immense, but his body showing the wear of countless centuries spent maintaining his vigil. He has been waiting for someone from the surface to arrive, knowing that eventually the crystals would be gathered and the path to the moon would open. What he tells them about Golbez and the true nature of this conflict shatters everything Cecil thought he understood. Golbez is Lunarian, or partially so, the child of a Lunarian man who traveled to the surface world and fell in love with a human woman. This makes Golbez far more powerful than any human could be, explaining his overwhelming magical abilities and his resistance to conventional attacks. But more than that, Fusoya reveals that Cecil himself shares this heritage. Cecil and Golbez are brothers, both sons of the same Lunarian father, Kluya, who came to the surface seeking to understand humanity and ended up creating a family. Their mother was human, and she raised both boys after Kluya's death, though in very different circumstances. Golbez was taken as a child by a Lunarian named Zemus, a member of the sleeping civilization who rejected the plan to wait peacefully for humanity's evolution. Zemus believes that Lunarians should conquer the surface world, that their superior power gives them the right and responsibility to rule over the lesser races. Zemus has been manipulating Golbez since childhood, warping the boy's mind through a combination of magic and psychological conditioning until Golbez became a puppet acting out Zemus's will. Everything Golbez has done, all the crystal theft and conquest, has been in service of Zemus's plan to destroy humanity and claim the surface world for the Lunarians. The revelation is almost too much for Cecil to process. The man he has been fighting is his own brother, a victim of manipulation just as much as those Golbez has hurt. And Cecil's own heritage, the mystery of his origin that has always troubled him, is answered in a way that connects him directly to this cosmic conflict between ancient civilizations. But there is no time for extended processing of these revelations. Even as Fusoya explains all this, alarms begin sounding throughout the Lunarian palace. Something is happening on the surface world, some catastrophe in progress that demands immediate attention. Using scrying magic, Fusoya shows them what is occurring far below. The 8 crystals that Golbez collected have been used to power the Tower of Babel, and the tower has transformed into something far worse than any mere weapon. It has become a prison for an enormous mechanical entity called the Giant of Babel, and this giant is now active and marching toward Baron. The giant is a walking fortress, hundreds of feet tall, armed with weapons that can level cities and protected by armor that conventional forces cannot penetrate. If it reaches Baron, it will destroy the kingdom utterly, and from there it will continue its rampage across the surface world until human civilization is ground to dust beneath its inexorable advance. Fusoya immediately prepares to descend to the surface, to stop the giant before it can complete its mission of destruction. He cannot allow Zemus's plan to proceed, cannot permit the wholesale slaughter of the surface world's inhabitants. Cecil and his companions join him on the lunar whale, racing back toward their home world as the giant continues its terrible march. When they arrive above Baron, they can see the scale of the catastrophe clearly. The giant towers over the landscape, each of its steps shaking the earth, its weapons firing indiscriminately at anything in its path. Baron's military is attempting to engage it, airships bombarding the giant with everything they have, but their attacks are having no visible effect. The giant's armor simply absorbs the damage, and its counterattacks swat. Baron's forces from the sky like insects. The only way to stop the giant is to enter it, to destroy its power source from within. The lunar whale positions itself to allow Cecil's party to board the giant, and they fight their way inside this mobile fortress. The giant's interior is a maze of mechanical corridors and chambers, populated by automated defenses and the remains of the dwarven engineers who were forced to construct this abomination. They battle through multiple levels, destroying power conduits and disabling weapon systems, working their way toward the giant's core. In the central chamber, they discovered that the giant is controlled by an advanced computer system, a CPU, whose intelligence governs all the giant's functions. This CPU is unlike any technology they have encountered, a fusion of Lunarian magic and dwarven engineering that has created something approaching artificial consciousness. The battle with the CPU is surreal, fighting against an enemy that is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, manifesting through various mechanical avatars and defensive systems, while its true core remains protected. They damage enough systems that the CPU deploys its ultimate defense. The Archfiends themselves, or rather, mechanical recreations of the 4 Archfiends powered by the CPU's energy. Scarmiglione, Cagnazzo, Barbariccia, and Rubicante return, their forms twisted into combinations of the creatures they were and the mechanical systems that now house their consciousness. Each Archfiend must be defeated again, and the battles are even more challenging than the first encounters because the CPU has analyzed Cecil's tactics and adapted the Archfiend's abilities to counter them more effectively. When all 4 Archfiends have been destroyed for the second time, the CPU itself becomes vulnerable. The final battle pushes Cecil and his companions to their absolute limits, the CPU wielding both devastating magical attacks and physical force as it desperately tries to defend itself and complete its mission. But mortal determination proves stronger than mechanical programming. The CPU falls, its core destroyed, and the giant of Babil begins to shut down, its march halting just miles from Baron's walls. The surface world is saved, the immediate threat neutralized, but the cost becomes immediately apparent. Fusoya, who descended with them to confront Golbez and hopefully free him from Zemus's control, has used enormous amounts of his life force in the battles. The ancient Lunarian is fading, his physical form becoming translucent as his magic sustains him less and less effectively. But before Fusoya departs entirely, he completes his final mission. Using the last of his power, he breaks the enchantment that has controlled Kain since the Battle of Fabul. The dragon's mind clears completely for the first time in months, and the full horror of what he has done under Zemus's control crashes down upon him. Kain betrayed Cecil repeatedly, helped Golbez, steal crystals, stood by while people died, all while his true self was locked away screaming helplessly inside his own mind. The guilt is overwhelming, and Kain collapses under the weight of his actions. Cecil helps his friend stand, tells him that none of it was Kain's fault, that they were all victims of Zemus's manipulation, but forgiveness, even freely given, cannot immediately erase shame, and Kain must carry forward knowing what his body did, even if his mind was not in control. Fusoya reveals one final piece of crucial information before his strength fails entirely. Golbez too has been freed from Zemus's control, the destruction of the giant breaking whatever connection the Lunarian used to command him. But Golbez, aware now of all the atrocities he committed under compulsion, has gone to the moon to confront Zemus directly. He intends to stop the Lunarian from attempting any further attacks on the surface world, even if it costs him his life. Fusoya departs to join Golbez in this confrontation, the two of them ascending to the moon aboard the lunar whale, leaving Cecil and his companions on the surface to recover and prepare for whatever comes next. But Cecil cannot simply wait while his brother faces an ancient and powerful enemy. If Golbez and Fusoya are going to confront Zemus, then Cecil must be there too, both to help and to finally speak with his brother as family rather than enemies. The lunar whale awaits at Baron's harbor, and Cecil makes plans to return to the moon. But before they can depart, two unexpected stowaways reveal themselves. Rosa and a young woman who looks remarkably like Rydia aboard the whale, announcing their intention to accompany Cecil on this final journey. The young woman is Rydia, but transformed. When Leviathan swallowed her during the sea voyage, the child was not killed, but transported to the Feymark, a realm where eidolons live between summonings. Time flows differently there, and what was mere months on the surface world was years for Rydia. She is grown from child to young woman in the Feymarsh, trained by the eidolons themselves in summoning magic, and she has returned with power that rivals the greatest mages. Seeing Rydia alive, seeing the frightened child who once blamed him for her mother's death, now returned as a powerful ally who has chosen to fight alongside him, fills Cecil with hope. Perhaps redemption is possible after all. Perhaps the future does not have to be defined entirely by the sins of the past. They ascend to the moon once more, and this time they venture beyond the Lunarian Palace toward a location Fusoya mentioned called the Lunar Subterrane. This is a massive underground complex beneath the moon's surface, built to house Zemus's sealed prison. The other Lunarians, recognizing Zemus's dangerous obsession with conquering the surface world, placed him in magical suspension just as they entered their own long sleep. But somehow, Zemus has maintained consciousness. Despite the seal, and over centuries, he has learned to project his will beyond his prison, to manipulate events and people on the surface world far below. Golbez was merely his most successful puppet, but Zemus has been subtly influencing human affairs for generations, nudging civilizations toward conflict and conquest, trying to create the conditions for his own release and the subjugation of humanity. The Lunar Subterrane is a place of eerie beauty, crystalline structures that seem grown rather than built, passages that wind through solid rock with no regard for normal geometry. The deeper they descend, the more powerful the monsters become, creatures that feed on concentrated magical energy and have grown enormous in the subterrane's charged atmosphere. They fight through multiple levels, always descending toward the heart of this moon core complex where Zemus maintains his imprisoned consciousness. In the deepest chamber, they find Golbez and Fusoya confronting the Lunarian. Zemus's form suspended in a crystalline matrix that serves as both prison and throne. Zemus is ancient beyond measure, his body withered by centuries, but his mind still sharp and seething with hatred for humanity. He rails against Fusoya and the other Lunarians who chose to sleep rather than claim their rightful dominance over the inferior races. He mocks Golbez for being weak enough to break free of control, for choosing humanity over his Lunarian heritage. And when he sees Cecil, sees another of Cluya's sons who dared to oppose him, Zemus's fury reaches new heights. He begins to break free of his prison, the crystal that held him for so long cracking under the pressure of his rage. Fusoya and Golbez combine their magic, channeling everything they have left into one final spell designed to neutralize Zemus permanently. The blast of pure magical energy strikes Zemus full force, and for a moment it seems they have succeeded. Zemus's body dissolves, his consciousness apparently destroyed, and his prison collapses into rubble. But victory is an illusion. As Zemus's physical form disintegrates, something else emerges from the remains. This is not the ancient Lunarian they fought, but something born from his essence, given form by the depth of his hatred and the power of his dying will. Zeromus materializes in the chamber, a being of pure malice wearing a vaguely humanoid shape, its body crackling with dark energy that makes the very walls of the subterrane crack and bleed light. This is what Zemus became, his consciousness distilled into hatred so intense that it transcends death, becoming an entity whose sole purpose is destruction of everything the surface world represents. Zeromus is rage given form, and its power is beyond anything they have faced before. The battle with Zeramus seems impossible from its first moment. The creature shrugs off their attacks, heals itself faster than they can damage it, and unleashes magic that warps reality and threatens to tear their bodies apart at the molecular level. Fusoya and Golbez, exhausted from their confrontation with Zemus, can barely defend themselves. Cecil's party fights with everything they have, but it is not enough. Zeramus is not merely powerful, but fundamentally indestructible, sustained by hatred that cannot be killed through conventional means. They are losing, being driven back toward defeat, and it seems certain they will all die here in this chamber beneath the moon's surface, their quest ending in failure. Then something changes. Cecil feels warmth spreading through his body, strength returning when it should be failing. Around him, his companions experience the same phenomenon, their wounds healing and their magic restoring. They look down and discover that their hands are glowing, that they are each holding a crystal, and light is pouring from these crystals into their bodies. But where did these crystals come from? The answer arrives as voices, dozens of voices echoing through the chamber, speaking words of encouragement and support. The voices belong to everyone they have met on their journey, every person who believed in them and wished for their success. The elder of Mysidia speaks words of forgiveness for what Cecil did to their town, acknowledging that he has more than atoned through his transformation and his battles to protect the innocent. The King of Baron pledges the strength of his kingdom behind Cecil's cause, his voice carrying the weight of a ruler who understands the consequences of allowing evil to triumph through inaction. Giot, King of the Dwarves, adds his voice and the support of the underworld's people, recognizing that surface and underground worlds share a common fate. Edward speaks from Damshan, his bardic voice carrying across the distance, singing Anna's memory and the hope that her death will not be meaningless if they can stop Zemus's hatred from consuming everything. But there are other voices too, ones that should not be possible. Yang speaks, alive against all odds, his monk's discipline allowing him to survive being buried in the Tower of Babel's rubble. The dwarves found him and nursed him back to health, and now his strength joins the prayers supporting Cecil. Palom and Porom's voices ring out, the twins freed from their petrification through magic that the elder of Mysidia discovered in ancient texts, their youth and enthusiasm undimmed by their ordeal. Even Sid, Baron's chief engineer who threw himself from an airship to lighten its load and allow the others to escape danger, survived the fall through a combination of luck and landing in a soft bog. Each person who Cecil believed he had failed, who he thought died because he was not strong enough to protect them, is alive and lending their support across the vast distance between moon and world. The crystals in their hands are manifestations of this collective hope, the prayers and belief of everyone on the surface world, coalescing into tangible power. This is what defeats pure hatred, not matching it with equivalent destruction, but answering it with connection, with the strength that comes from bonds between people who choose to support each other. The crystals grow brighter, the light becoming almost blinding in its intensity, and when Cecil and his companions strike Zeramus again, their attacks finally bite deep. The creature's invulnerability is stripped away by the power of these prayers, its armor of hatred cracking under the assault of hope made manifest. The battle transforms from hopeless struggle into genuine contest. Zeramus fights with desperate fury now, sensing its impending defeat, unleashing attacks that shake the entire subterrane and threaten to collapse the moon's core. But Cecil's party matches its intensity, their attacks coordinated and powerful, each strike weakening the creature further. Rosa's white magic sustains them through injuries that would have been fatal. Rydia's summoned eidolons tear at Zeramus with primal force. Edge's ninjutsu exploits weaknesses in the creature's constantly shifting form, and Kain's dragoon jumps allow him to strike from angles that Zeramus cannot easily defend. Cecil himself, no longer the Dark Knight who followed orders without question, but the paladin who chose to fight for something greater than duty, delivers blow after blow with holy power that burns away the darkness sustaining Zeramus's existence. When the final strike connects, Zeramus does not simply die. The creature understands in its last moments that it has lost, that hatred alone is not sufficient to overcome the bonds between people who care for each other. There is almost something like peace in its dissolution, as if the entity that was once Zemus can finally rest now that its obsession has been exhausted. Zeromus's form collapses into particles of light that drift away like embers on a wind, the malice that sustained it dispersing into nothingness, and the chamber grows still and quiet. The battle is over. Zemus's threat is ended. The surface world is safe from Lunarian conquest. The crystals in their hands fade away, returning to wherever prayers go when their purpose is fulfilled, and Cecil finds himself simply standing in a cavern beneath an alien moon, with his companions alive around him. Golbez approaches Cecil slowly, his armor scorched and damaged, his movements pained. For the first time, they can speak as brothers rather than enemies, without Zemus's influence distorting Golbez's mind or forcing him to act against his will. Golbez apologizes for everything, though he knows apologies are inadequate for the harm he caused. He killed Tella, manipulated Kain, stole the crystals, orchestrated attacks that killed countless innocents. The fact that he was controlled does not erase these actions, and Golbez must carry the weight of them for however long he lives. Cecil tries to offer forgiveness, to tell his brother that none of it was truly his fault, but Golbez cannot accept such easy absolution. He has seen what his hands did, remembers every atrocity even though his will was not his own, and he needs time to process this trauma before he can even consider moving forward. Fusoya, his life force nearly depleted, makes one final request of Cecil. The Lunarians will continue their long sleep, waiting for the day when humanity evolves to a point where true cooperation between the races becomes possible. Cecil, as the child of both worlds, represents the potential for this future. He must return to the surface and help guide humanity toward a future where power is used responsibly, where the mistakes of the past are not repeated, where fear of the other does not lead to the kind of hatred that consumed Zemus. It is a heavy burden to place on anyone, but Fusoya believes that Cecil's journey, his transformation from Dark Knight to Paladin through conscious choice rather than destiny, proves he is capable of bearing it. Cecil accepts this responsibility, understanding that his trials were not merely about stopping Zemus, but about becoming someone worthy of helping shape the future. Golbez chooses to remain on the moon. He cannot face the surface world yet, cannot walk among the people he harmed even in the knowledge that he was not in control of his actions. He will watch over the sleeping Lunarians, taking on Fusoya's vigil, ensuring that no one else abuses their power or attempts to conquer the world below. It is a kind of penance, perhaps, or simply a way to avoid confronting the consequences of what his body did while his mind was imprisoned. Cecil understands his brother's need for isolation, though it saddens him to be separated after only just learning they are family. They part with the hope that someday, when enough time has passed and enough healing has occurred, they might meet again as brothers without the shadow of Zemus's crimes between them. The journey back to the surface world aboard the lunar whale is subdued. They have won. The world is saved. But the victory feels less triumphant than exhausting. Too many people died. Too much suffering occurred. And though Zemus's direct threat is ended, the damage he caused will take generations to fully heal. Baron must rebuild its reputation and atone for the crimes committed in its name, even if the king himself was imprisoned and replaced during most of the conquest. Mysidia must reconcile with Baron despite the theft of their crystal and the attack that began this entire chain of events. The dwarves must repair their relationship with the surface world, now that the barrier between has been breached and can never be fully restored. These are complex political and social challenges that will not be solved by any amount of sword skill or magical power. But there is also hope. The fact that people from different kingdoms and races work together to defeat Zemus demonstrates that cooperation is possible even across vast differences. Cecil's own transformation from Dark Knight to Paladin shows that people can change, that redemption is achievable for those willing to confront their mistakes and choose better paths forward. The survival of Yang, Palom, Porom, and Sid proves that even apparent tragedies can have unexpected resolutions, that giving up hope is premature until all possibilities have been exhausted. These lessons will matter in the years ahead as the world works to build something better from the ashes of Zemus's attempted conquest. When the lunar whale descends to Baron's harbor, they find the kingdom transformed. News of Zemus's defeat has spread, carried by the magical communications that the Elder of Mysidia established with courts across the world. People understand now what was at stake, the scale of the threat that Cecil and his companions faced, and the debt that all of humanity owes to these heroes who risked everything to protect a world that had not always treated them kindly. The King of Baron formally abdicates, recognizing that his imprisonment and impersonation have compromised his ability to rule effectively. He offers the throne to Cecil, the man who saved the kingdom and the world, the paladin whose transformation from Dark Knight symbolizes the change that Baron itself must undergo. Cecil accepts the throne not out of desire for power, but from recognition that someone must help guide Baron through the difficult years ahead. The kingdom has much to atone for, many relationships to repair, and having a ruler who understands the cost of blind obedience to authority might help prevent future atrocities. Rosa agrees to rule beside him as queen, her white magic and diplomatic skills complementing Cecil's martial prowess and moral compass. Together, they represent a different kind of royalty, one based on service and responsibility, rather than mere hereditary privilege or military might. Kain, struggling with guilt over his actions under Zemus's control, asks to be relieved of his position as commander of the Dragoons. He needs time away from Baron, time to travel and find some way to atone for what his body did, even if his mind was not responsible. Cecil grants this request, understanding that forcing Kain to remain would only deepen his suffering, and promises that when his friend is ready to return, he will be welcomed without judgment or recrimination. Edge returns to the ruins of Eblan, determined to rebuild his kingdom from the ashes of Golbez's destruction. The ninja prince has learned through his journey that leadership requires more than bravado and skill with weapons. It demands wisdom, patience, and genuine care for the people being led. He carries these lessons back to his surviving subjects, ready to become the prince that Eblan needs rather than merely the warrior he was trained to be. Rydia chooses to remain in Baron for a time, helping establish better relationships between humans and eidolons, teaching summoners who approach the art with respect rather than viewing these powerful creatures as mere tools to be commanded. Her unique perspective, having been raised among eidolons in the Feymarsh and witnessing how they view the surface world, makes her invaluable in building mutual understanding between species. Yang returns to Fabul, his survival celebrated by the mountain kingdom that mourned him as dead. His wife and daughter, who had resigned themselves to his loss, welcome him home with tears and laughter mixed together. Yang resumes his duties as commander of Fabul's monks, but his near-death experience has given him new appreciation for life's fragility and the importance of protecting what matters rather than seeking glory in combat. He will train the next generation of warriors to understand that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when fighting is necessary and when other solutions should be pursued. Palom and Porom return to Mysidia, their brief experience of death through petrification, making them simultaneously more serious and more appreciative of the time they have. The twins continue their magical education, but they also become teachers themselves, sharing the lessons they learned traveling with Cecil about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of questioning authority when orders conflict with conscience. The elder of Mysidia watches over them with pride, recognizing that the next generation of mages will be stronger for having examples like the twins, who combined magical power with moral courage. Cid remains in Baron as chief engineer, but his focus shifts from military applications to civilian infrastructure. The Tower of Babel demonstrated the dangers of creating weapons without considering the consequences of their use. Cid dedicates himself to developing technology that improves lives rather than ending them. Airships designed for trade and communication rather than war. Engines that run on renewable energy rather than draining the planet's resources. His work will take years to fully realize, but it represents the kind of transformation that must occur if the mistakes of the past are to be avoided in the future. The wedding of Cecil and Rosa becomes a celebration for the entire world. Representatives from every kingdom and race gathering in Baron to witness the union and to symbolically mark the beginning of a new era. The ceremony takes place in Baron's throne room, but the celebrations extend throughout the city and beyond. People who would have been enemies mere months ago, now sharing food and stories and hope for the future. It is not perfect reconciliation. Too much history and hurt exists for complete healing to occur so quickly. But it is a beginning. It represents the choice to move forward together, rather than remaining trapped in cycles of revenge and recrimination. During the ceremony, Cecil looks out at the assembled guests and sees the faces of everyone who helped bring them to this moment. The elder of Mysidia stands, with the king of Fabul, old enemies who have found common cause. Giot and the dwarven delegation mingle with surface dwellers, the two civilizations learning to know each other as people rather than myths. Yang's strength and gentleness, Edge's growth from brash youth to responsible leader, Rydia's journey from orphan child to powerful mage who chooses compassion over vengeance. All of these transformations give Cecil hope that the world really can become something better than what it was. Even Kain makes a brief appearance at the wedding, unable to stay away despite his self-imposed exile. He speaks with Cecil privately, apologizes once more for the betrayals committed under Zemus's control, and Cecil embraces his friend without hesitation or reservation. The past happened and cannot be changed, but it does not have to define the future. Kain departs again before the ceremony concludes, still unable to forgive himself even if others have forgiven him. But his presence alone demonstrates that healing is possible even for the deepest wounds. Time will be required, and patience, and the understanding that recovery is not a straight line, but a process with setbacks and struggles. But the possibility exists, and that is enough for now. As the celebrations wind down and guests begin departing for their home kingdoms, Cecil stands with Rosa on Baron Castle's balcony, looking out over the city and the world beyond. The moon hangs in the sky above them, both the familiar satellite they have always known, and now the hidden moon of the Lunarians, visible to those who know to look for it. Golbez is up there somewhere, maintaining his vigil over the sleeping civilization, and Cecil sends a silent thought toward his brother. Perhaps someday they will meet again. Perhaps Golbez will find the peace he seeks. Perhaps the Lunarians will wake to find a surface world ready to greet them as friends, rather than seeing them as threats or conquerors. These are hopes rather than certainties, but hope has proven itself a powerful force, strong enough to defeat the concentrated hatred of an ancient being and save a world from destruction. Rosa takes Cecil's hand, and they stand together in comfortable silence. Two people who have been through more in a few months than most experience in entire lifetimes. They have faced death and loss, witnessed betrayal and sacrifice, been tested in ways that revealed both their weaknesses and their strengths. They have changed, individually and together, becoming people capable of bearing the responsibility that leadership demands. The challenges ahead will be different from those they faced against Golbez and Zemus. Less about combat and more about negotiation. Less about defeating enemies and more about building alliances. But they face these challenges together and with the support of friends scattered across the world who will help however they can. The story of Final Fantasy IV is fundamentally about transformation and redemption. Cecil's journey from Dark Knight to Paladin represents not a rejection of his past, but an integration of it, accepting responsibility for his actions while choosing to become better, rather than being paralyzed by guilt. His transformation is not instantaneous or easy, but earned through painful self-examination and the courage to change when confronted with the truth about himself and his service to Baron. The game asks difficult questions about obedience to authority, about when following orders becomes complicity in evil, about the responsibility individuals bear for their actions even when operating within systems that encourage or demand wrongdoing. But it is also a story about forgiveness and the possibility of redemption for even those who have committed terrible acts. Golbez, who orchestrated conquests and killed innocents, is revealed to be a victim of manipulation, who deserves compassion even while being held accountable for his actions. Kain, who betrayed Cecil repeatedly, was not acting of his own free will and must be forgiven while being allowed the space to forgive himself. The game does not offer easy answers about guilt and responsibility, does not suggest that having explanations for bad behavior erases the harm caused, but it does insist that people are capable of change and deserve chances to atone for their mistakes. The relationship between Cecil and his companions demonstrates the power of chosen family and connections forged through shared struggle. They come from different backgrounds, different kingdoms, different species in some cases, but they unite around common purpose and develop bonds stronger than blood alone could create. Rosa's love for Cecil persists through his transformation and doubts, anchoring him when his sense of self threatens to dissolve. Rydia's decision to forgive Cecil for her mother's death and fight alongside him despite their terrible history shows that even the deepest wounds can heal given time and genuine effort at atonement. Yang's steady reliability, Edge's growth from arrogance to wisdom, the twins' combination of power and innocence, all of these relationships enrich Cecil and provide him with strength he could never access alone. The theme of balance between different civilizations and the dangers of unchecked power run throughout the narrative. The Lunarians chose to sleep rather than dominate the surface world, recognizing that their superior power did not grant them moral authority to rule over others. This stands in stark contrast to Zemus's belief that strength justifies conquest, that the powerful have both right and responsibility to control the weak. The game comes down firmly on the side of restraint and mutual respect, suggesting that true strength lies in choosing not to abuse power, rather than in the raw capability to do so. Baron's fall from honorable kingdom to tool of conquest illustrates what happens when power is pursued without wisdom, when military might becomes divorced from ethical considerations. The environmental undertones, while less prominent than in some later entries in the series, still resonate through the story. The crystals represent natural forces and resources that can be exploited or respected, their theft by Golbez symbolizing humanity's tendency to take from the world without consideration for consequences. The Tower of Babel and the giant it houses represent the dangers of technology developed without ethical oversight, of creating destructive capabilities without thoroughly considering how they might be misused. The dwarves' more harmonious relationship with their environment, living in balance with the underworld's geothermal resources rather than depleting them, offers a model for sustainable existence that contrasts with Baron's more exploitative approach. The inclusion of characters from diverse backgrounds and species speaks to themes of tolerance and cooperation across difference. The party that defeats Zemus includes humans from multiple kingdoms, a summoner raised by eidolons, and representatives of both surface and underworld civilizations. Their diversity is presented as strength rather than weakness, their different abilities and perspectives allowing them to overcome challenges that homogeneous groups could not handle. This diversity extends to their methods of contributing, with Edward providing support from afar, using his bardic network rather than joining combat directly, demonstrating that heroism takes many forms, and not everyone needs to wield weapons to make crucial differences. The game's treatment of death walks an interesting line between consequence and hope. Characters die or appear to die throughout the story, and each loss carries emotional weight that drives character development and plot progression. Anna's death motivates Teller's quest for vengeance, and Edward's eventual growth beyond grief. Teller's death, after casting Meteor, demonstrates the cost of pursuing revenge and the limits of individual power against forces like Golbez. Yang's apparent sacrifice in the Tower of Babel shows that heroism sometimes requires accepting that you might not survive to see victory. Palom and Porom's petrification illustrates the price of protecting others. Yet many of these deaths are later revealed to be survivable, characters returning when their presence becomes narratively appropriate. This could be seen as cheapening death's impact, but it also reinforces themes of hope and resilience, suggesting that even apparent tragedies might have unexpected resolutions. The cosmology of Final Fantasy IV, with its hidden moon and ancient civilizations, creates a sense of depth and history that extends far beyond the immediate plot. The Lunarians are not simple antagonists, but a complex civilization with their own internal conflicts, their choice to sleep rather than conquer showing moral sophistication that complicates simplistic good versus evil frameworks. The revelation that Cecil and Golbez are children of two worlds, that their heritage connects them to both human and Lunarian civilizations, suggests that the future lies not in one race dominating the other, but in synthesis and cooperation between them. Cecil becomes a bridge between worlds, his very existence proof that the boundaries between human and Lunarian are not absolute, and that peaceful coexistence might be achievable. The role of prayer and collective belief in defeating Zeramus represents a rejection of the lone hero narrative in favor of something more communal. Cecil and his companions cannot defeat Zeramus through their own strength alone, requiring the spiritual and emotional support of everyone they have helped throughout their journey. This final battle becomes about connection and hope overcoming isolation and hatred, about the many joining together to oppose the one. The crystals that manifest from these prayers are physical representations of human solidarity, of the power generated when people choose to support each other rather than competing or remaining isolated. It is a deeply optimistic message about collective action and mutual aid that feels especially resonant. The ending, with Cecil and Rosa's wedding and the promise of rebuilding, offers closure while acknowledging that significant work remains. Defeating Zemus does not magically solve all political tensions or erase the damage caused by months of conflict and conquest. Relationships between kingdoms remain strained. Individuals still carry trauma from their experiences, and the structural problems that allowed Baron to become a tool of conquest have not been fully addressed. But the ending suggests hope that these challenges can be overcome through sustained effort and good faith engagement. The choice to reform, rather than simply replacing one ruler with another, indicates understanding that systemic change requires more than individual virtue. The character of Cecil serves as the game's moral center, his internal struggles and growth providing the framework through which players engage with the story's themes. His questioning of orders in the opening scenes establishes him as someone with conscience even before his transformation, someone who cannot simply follow commands when they conflict with his understanding of right and wrong. His demotion and the mission to Mist punish this conscience, demonstrating how systems respond to dissent even when the dissent is morally justified. His decision to protect Rydia despite his guilt over her mother's death shows him prioritizing the innocent over his own comfort. Choosing to help even when doing so means confronting reminders of his failures. The journey to Mount Ordeals and transformation from Dark Knight to Paladin represents Cecil's conscious rejection of his past approach to life. He cannot defeat his shadow self through combat because violence is the problem, not the solution. He must instead accept his darkness integrated into his understanding of himself and choose to move forward guided by light rather than being paralyzed by shame. This internal work is prerequisite to his external heroism, the game insisting that changing systems requires first changing oneself. Cecil's new powers as Paladin are not rewards for completing a quest, but manifestations of his internal transformation, his holy magic representing genuine moral growth, rather than mere acquisition of new techniques. Rosa's character, while sometimes falling into traditional supportive female role tropes, nevertheless displays agency and capability throughout the story. Her decision to travel to Mist, despite knowing it is dangerous, demonstrates her refusal to simply wait passively while Cecil faces threats. Her illness in Kaipo is not mere damsel in distress plotting, but natural consequence of pursuing Cecil through inhospitable terrain without proper preparation. Her capture by Golbez does place her in traditional hostage role, but her presence in the final battles shows she is not content to remain protected when the fate of the world hangs in balance. Her choice to stow away on the lunar whale rather than waiting safely on the surface demonstrates understanding that being queen requires sharing burdens rather than being sheltered from them. Rydia's arc from traumatized child to powerful young woman represents resilience and the capacity for growth even after devastating loss. Her initial hatred of Cecil is completely justified given that he killed her mother and destroyed her village, even if unintentionally. Her gradual softening toward him comes not from forgetting what happened, but from recognizing that he too is victim of circumstances beyond his control, and that he genuinely regrets his actions. Her time in the Feymach transforms her from helpless orphan into formidable mage, but more importantly, it gives her perspective that allows her to see Eidolons as partners and friends rather than mere servants. Her return brings not just magical power, but emotional maturity, the child who needed protection becoming the woman who protects others. Kain's tragedy lies in his dual nature, his genuine affection for Cecil and Rosa, competing with envy over Cecil's accomplishments and Rosa's affections. Even before Zemus's control, Kain struggles with these conflicting emotions, his friendship strained by rivalry that he can neither fully embrace nor entirely dismiss. Being used as Golbez's puppet transforms this internal conflict into external action, forcing Kain to watch helplessly as his body enacts betrayals his mind would never choose. His guilt after being freed is more complex than simple regret over actions committed, encompassing shame at the relief he feels that control provided excuse for his darker impulses. Kain must live knowing that some part of him wanted what Zemus made him do, and that self-knowledge is more painful than any physical wound. Edge begins as the most overtly archetypal character, the brash young ninja prince whose confidence masks insecurity about living up to his kingdom's expectations. His journey involves learning that heroism is not about individual glory, but about protecting others and making sacrifices for the greater good. His parents' transformation into monsters by Golbez forces Edge to kill them himself, a trauma that could have broken him, but instead deepens his understanding of the stakes they face. He emerges from this crucible more mature, his cockiness tempered by painful awareness of what can be lost when evil is not opposed effectively. His return to rebuild Eblan shows him accepting responsibilities he might have previously run from, stepping into leadership role with newfound wisdom. Yang's character embodies the warrior who fights for protection rather than conquest, whose strength is deployed defensively rather than aggressively. His monk training emphasizes discipline and control, martial prowess directed by moral principles rather than mere effectiveness. His willingness to sacrifice himself in the Tower of Babel demonstrates understanding that some things matter more than individual survival, that protecting others and preventing greater evil justifies personal risk. His survival and return does not diminish this sacrifice, but rather allows him to continue living according to the principles that made him willing to die for them. He becomes example of how warriors can serve peace rather than merely being tools of violence. The twins, Palom and Porom, provide comic relief through their bickering, but also demonstrate that even the young can make heroic choices when circumstances demand. Their petrification scene is emotionally devastating precisely because they are children who should not have to make such sacrifices, who should be protected by adults rather than protecting adults through their own deaths. Their survival and return does not erase the emotional impact of that moment, but rather reinforces that hope persists even in darkest circumstances, that apparent endings might actually be pauses before new beginnings. Tella represents the dangers of allowing grief to transform into obsessive need for revenge. His love for Anna is genuine, and his grief at her death completely understandable, but his single-minded pursuit of Golbez blinds him to alternatives and ultimately kills him, even though it fails to achieve his stated goal. His death serves as warning against allowing pain to dictate actions, against pursuing revenge when it requires sacrificing everything else that makes life worth living. Yet his sacrifice is not portrayed as entirely futile. His attack on Golbez weakening the enemy and buying time for others even if it does not achieve the vengeance Teller sought. Edward's transformation from seemingly frivolous bard to crucial support figure demonstrates that heroism takes many forms and that non-combat contributions matter as much as martial prowess. His grief over Anna paralyzes him initially, but Rydia's harsh words about her own loss shock him into recognizing that wallowing in pain helps no one. His network of contacts and his bardic ability to inspire others through song become invaluable assets, showing that information and morale are as important as weapons in prolonged conflicts. His choice to remain in Damkian and rebuild, rather than continuing to adventure, shows maturity in understanding where his strengths lie and how he can best serve the greater good. The 4 archfiends serve as memorable boss encounters, but also represent different aspects of natural forces corrupted toward destructive ends. Scarmiglione's dominion over death and decay, Cagnazzo's control of water and drowning, Barbaricia's mastery of wind and storm, Rubicante's command of fire and burning, all demonstrate that elemental forces are neutral, but can be directed toward harmful purposes by those seeking power. Their defeat does not destroy these natural forces, but rather removes individuals who were abusing them, allowing balance to be restored. Their return within the Giant of Babel, as mechanical approximations, shows how even defeated enemies can be resurrected in twisted forms when their essence is exploited by those who come after. Golbez's complexity as antagonist elevates the story beyond simple hero versus villain dynamics. His power and ruthlessness make him genuinely threatening, his actions causing enormous harm regardless of his lack of free will. Yet the revelation that he is both Cecil's brother and himself a victim of Zemus's manipulation complicates moral judgment, forcing acknowledgement that people can be simultaneously perpetrator and victim, that harm can be done by those who would never choose such actions if truly free. His decision to remain on the moon after Zemus's defeat shows understanding that he cannot simply be forgiven and move on, that atonement requires more than explanations even when those explanations reveal lack of culpability. His self-imposed exile gives him space to process what his body did, while his mind was imprisoned, to reconcile the person he wants to be with the actions he was forced to commit. The relationship between Cecil and Golbez remains one of the game's most emotionally resonant elements. 2 brothers who should have grown up together instead, separated by circumstance and manipulation. Their final conversation before Golbez departs for his lunar vigil carries weight of lost time and shared tragedy, acknowledgement that blood connection matters even when individuals barely know each other. Cecil's willingness to forgive Golbez and his hope that they will meet again someday as true brothers demonstrates the redemptive possibilities the game champions. Golbez's inability to accept immediate forgiveness shows realistic complexity about trauma and guilt, recognition that healing takes time and cannot be rushed regardless of how much others might wish otherwise. Fusoyo serves as exposition device, but also as representation of wisdom earned through long experience. His willingness to help surface world, despite being Lunarian, shows that species membership does not determine moral character, that individuals can choose to act against what might be expected based on their origin. His sacrifice of remaining life force to free Golbez and Kain from Zemus's control demonstrates understanding that preserving younger lives matters more than extending his own already ancient existence. His final request that Cecil help guide humanity toward future where cooperation with Lunarians becomes possible places appropriate burden on someone whose heritage connects him to both civilizations. The Tower of Babel and the giant it houses represent the ultimate expression of technology divorced from ethical consideration. The dwarven engineers forced to construct this weapon understand they are building something terrible but lack power to refuse. Their expertise exploited by those with no concern for how their creation might be used. The giant's destructive capability is matched only by the tragedy of its existence, a marvel of engineering repurposed toward genocide. Its destruction prevents immediate catastrophe, but does not address the underlying problem of how knowledge can be weaponized when concentrated power exists without accountability. This remains a relevant challenge that the game acknowledges cannot be solved through simple victory in battle. The moon itself becomes character in the story, mysterious and beautiful, simultaneously threat and promise. The hidden Lunarian civilization sleeping beneath its surface represents potential for either conflict or cooperation, depending on how humanity evolves before they wake. The choice to show both surface world and moon in the ending, to make visible what was previously hidden, suggests that secrets once revealed cannot be forgotten. The future will require dealing with Lunarian presence consciously, rather than remaining ignorant of it, and how that relationship develops will depend on whether lessons from this conflict are remembered and applied. The music throughout the game enhances emotional beats and creates memorable associations between themes and characters or locations. The Red Wings theme that plays during opening sequence immediately establishes military might and ominous purpose. Golbez's theme conveys power and menace, while also hinting at tragedy beneath the surface. The final battle theme against Zeramus combines orchestra and choir to create sense of cosmic stakes, appropriate for confrontation with entity of pure hatred threatening all existence. The ending theme carries both triumph and melancholy, acknowledging victory while recognizing costs paid to achieve it. These musical moments stay with players long after completing the game, the melodies evoking memories of specific scenes and emotions experienced during them. The decision to give Final Fantasy IV an ensemble cast, rather than focusing exclusively on Cecil, allows for multiple perspectives and prevents the narrative from becoming too narrowly focused on single character's journey. Each party member contributes unique viewpoint shaped by their background and experiences, their conversations revealing different aspects of the world and its cultures. This diversity of perspective enriches the storytelling and prevents it from feeling like one person's story, with others merely supporting. Each character has agency and makes meaningful choices that affect plot's progression. Their presence matter beyond mere combat utility. The pacing moves from personal crisis to regional conflict, to global threat to cosmic confrontation. Each escalation feeling earned rather than arbitrary. Cecil's initial concern with his own moral crisis and what he owes to Rydia gradually expands as he learns about larger patterns of crystal theft and conquest. The revelation of Golbez's existence shifts focus from questioning Baron's king to opposing more powerful enemy. The journey to underworld expands geographical scope and introduces new civilizations. The final revelation about Lunarians and Zemus elevates stakes to existential level while tying back to personal relationship between Cecil and Golbez. This escalation maintains narrative momentum while never losing sight of personal relationships and individual character development that provide emotional grounding. The game's willingness to kill or appear to kill major characters creates genuine tension about whether anyone is safe. In an era where most games telegraphed character deaths far in advance or simply made protagonists effectively immortal, Final Fantasy IV's casualties felt shocking and impactful. The fact that many supposedly dead characters later return alive does reduce some of this impact in retrospect, but in moment of playing through first time, each apparent death carries real emotional weight. This demonstrates that even if characters survive, making players believe they might not create investment and stakes that pure safety cannot match. The transformation of Mysidia from enemy to ally illustrates how forgiveness and reconciliation are possible, even after serious harm has been committed. Cecil's raid on their town to steal the water crystal was unprovoked aggression that violated their peaceful community. They would be entirely justified in refusing to help him, or even seeking revenge for what he did. Instead, they offer him chance at redemption through Mount Ordeals, recognizing that punishing Cecil permanently serves no constructive purpose when he genuinely regrets his actions and seeks to change. Their willingness to work with him after his transformation demonstrates that bygones need not remain obstacles forever if genuine effort at atonement is made and accepted. Baron's own transformation from aggressor kingdom to potential leader in building better world mirrors Cecil's personal journey. The kingdom committed atrocities under the false king's rule, attacking peaceful neighbors and stealing their treasures. Simply replacing the leadership and claiming everything is fine now would be inadequate response to the harm caused. True reconciliation requires acknowledgement of wrong done, genuine apology, and sustained effort to rebuild trust through actions rather than mere words. Cecil's coronation represents opportunity for this transformation. His own history of moving from aggression to redemption serving as template for how Baron might earn forgiveness from those it harmed. The dwarves' integration into larger world, after centuries of isolation, shows both promise and challenge of increased connection between previously separate civilizations. Their technology and culture developed independently from surface kingdoms, creating differences that could lead to misunderstanding or conflict. But these differences also represent opportunities for mutual learning and growth, each civilization possessing knowledge and capabilities that could benefit the other if shared in spirit of cooperation, rather than competition. The breach between surface and underworld, created by Tower of Babel, cannot be sealed again, forcing both civilizations to consciously build relationship, rather than remaining ignorant of each other's existence. The game's visual presentation, while limited by technical constraints of the era, creates memorable imagery through strong art direction and clever use of available resources. The opening sequence with red wings flying through night sky establishes atmosphere immediately. The destruction of Mist Village conveys horror through flames and Rydia's reaction, rather than requiring graphic detail. Mount Ordeal's ascent shows progression through changing environments and increasingly difficult encounters. The Tower of Zot, floating in sky, creates sense of Golbez's power. The moon's surface with its alien architecture establishes that they have traveled beyond familiar world. These visual moments work within technical limitations to create scenes that players remember decades later. The battle system, while relatively straightforward compared to later entries in the series, serves the story by keeping focus on narrative rather than overwhelming players with mechanical complexity. The active time battle system creates sense of urgency and prevents battles from becoming turn-based exercises where players can plan indefinitely. Character-specific abilities like Cecil's Darkness attacks as Dark Knight and Holy Powers as Paladin, Rydia's Summoning Magic, Rosa's White Magic, Edge's Ninjutsu, and others create distinctive combat identities that reinforce their narrative roles. The system is deep enough to reward strategic thinking without requiring extensive grinding or optimization for players primarily interested in experiencing the story. The job system's absence in favor of fixed character classes means each party member maintains consistent identity rather than becoming interchangeable. Rosa is always a white mage, defined by healing and support magic. Rydia is always a summoner, her connection to Eidolon central to her character. Edge is always a ninja, his techniques reflecting his kingdom's martial traditions. This lack of flexibility in builds is actually narrative strength. Each character's abilities expressing who they are rather than being arbitrary gameplay choices. Players cannot simply optimize party composition by making everyone identical, must instead work with each character's strengths and weaknesses, creating more organic relationship with party members as individuals rather than collections of stats. The absence of extensive side content keeps focus tightly on main narrative without distraction. While some optional elements exist, the game primarily drives players forward through its story, rather than encouraging extensive exploration or grinding. This creates more cohesive pacing and prevents the kind of tonal whiplash that can occur when players spend hours on optional content between dramatic story beats. The streamlined experience respects player time while delivering complete narrative arc, demonstrating that bigger is not always better when it comes to storytelling in games. The translation, while imperfect by modern standards, successfully conveyed story's emotional core and thematic content to English-speaking audiences. Certain phrases and characterizations became iconic despite or because of their quirks, entering gaming culture and remaining recognizable decades later. The localization made Final Fantasy IV accessible to Western players at a crucial moment when Japanese RPGs were beginning to gain foothold in markets outside Japan, helping establish audience for genre that would support industry for decades to come. The impact of this translation work cannot be overstated, as it allowed story to reach players who would have otherwise never experienced it. The game's influence on subsequent RPGs established conventions that became genre standards. The emphasis on character-driven narrative rather than player-created protagonists, the use of dramatic cutscenes to convey important story moments, the willingness to kill major characters for emotional impact, the integration of personal relationships into larger conflicts. All of these elements appeared in Final Fantasy IV and were subsequently adopted by countless games that followed. The game demonstrated that console RPGs could tell stories as emotionally sophisticated as those found in other media, elevating expectations for what the genre could achieve. The legacy extends beyond direct influence on game design to cultural impact as artifact that defined moment in gaming history. For many players, Final Fantasy IV was their introduction to Japanese RPGs or to narrative-driven games that prioritize storytelling. The Super Nintendo's capabilities allowed for presentation that previous console generation could not match, making Final Fantasy IV showcase for what new hardware could achieve when combined with strong writing and thoughtful design. The commercial and critical success proved that there was substantial audience for story-focused games that asked players to invest emotionally as well as mechanically. The themes of redemption and transformation remain relevant regardless of setting or medium. Cecil's journey from Dark Knight to Paladin speaks to universal human experience of confronting one's mistakes and choosing to become better. His struggle with guilt over past actions while trying to move forward constructively reflects challenge that anyone who has caused harm must navigate. The game does not suggest that redemption is easy or that past actions can be erased, but it insists that people are capable of change and deserve opportunities to demonstrate growth through sustained effort, rather than being permanently defined by their worst moments. The examination of authority and obedience raises questions that transcend the fantasy setting. When do orders become unethical to follow? What responsibility do individuals bear for actions taken under command? How do systems encourage or enable wrongdoing by creating environments where questioning is punished? Cecil's opening dilemma, his discomfort with orders he followed, and the consequences of voicing that discomfort, reflects real-world dynamics of how organizations can compel participation in harmful actions through combination of pressure and punishment for dissent. His choice to break with Baron entirely, when he can no longer reconcile his values with his duty, offers model for how individuals might respond when institutional loyalty conflicts with moral principles. The portrayal of family, both biological and chosen, emphasizes that relationships are defined by care and commitment rather than merely blood connection. Cecil and Golbez are brothers by birth, but strangers by circumstance, their relationship requiring conscious effort to build rather than existing automatically due to shared parentage. Meanwhile, Cecil's bonds with Rosa, Kain, and others who share his journey demonstrate that family can be chosen, that the deepest connections sometimes form between people who select each other rather than being assigned by genetics. This inclusive understanding of family validates diverse relationship structures and acknowledges that not all biological families are healthy, while chosen families can provide genuine support and belonging. The environmental themes, while subtle, acknowledge that resource exploitation has consequences that cannot be ignored indefinitely. The crystals represent natural forces that can be respected or abused. Their theft by Golbez, symbolizing extractive relationship with world rather than sustainable one. The Tower of Babel, powered by crystal energy to operate weapon of mass destruction, illustrates how natural resources can be weaponized when concentrated in hands of those seeking power without wisdom. These themes resonate beyond fantasy setting to comment on real-world dynamics of environmental degradation and the challenge of maintaining sustainable practices in face of short-term incentives for exploitation. The ending's optimism is tempered by realism about the work that remains. Defeating Zemus prevents immediate existential threat, but does not solve underlying political tensions or erase damage caused during months of conflict. Relationships between kingdoms remain strained. Individuals still carry trauma, and structural problems that enabled crisis persist. But the ending suggests hope that these challenges can be addressed through good faith effort and mutual support. The wedding celebration brings together former enemies and representatives of different civilizations, creating space for connection and understanding that might serve as foundation for better future. It acknowledges that building peace is harder and slower than winning battles, but ultimately more important. The decision to show multiple characters finding their paths forward, rather than focusing exclusively on Cecil's future, demonstrates understanding that heroism is collective endeavor. Edge returns to rebuild Eblan. Yang resumes duties in Fable with renewed appreciation for peace. Rydia helps build understanding between humans and Eidolons. The twins continue their education while teaching others. Cid redirects his engineering toward constructive purposes, and Kain begins his own journey of healing and atonement. Each character's choice matters, their individual efforts combining to create better world than any single person could build alone. This distributed heroism reflects game's broader themes about connection and mutual support being stronger than individual power. The revelation about Cecil's heritage as child of two worlds positions him uniquely to help build bridges between human and Lunarian civilizations. His very existence proves that these seemingly separate species can produce viable offspring, that biological boundaries between them are not absolute. More importantly, His lived experience of being raised as human while carrying Lunarian blood gives him perspective that pure members of either group cannot match. He understands human concerns and limitations while also carrying genetic legacy of more powerful civilization. This positioning makes him ideal mediator for future conflicts and symbol of what might be possible if both groups choose cooperation over competition. The contrast between Zemus's isolation and hatred versus the connection and support that defeats him illustrates core message about what makes life worth living. Zemus's power is immense but ultimately sterile, directed entirely toward destruction rather than creation, rooted in contempt for others rather than appreciation of them. The prayers that manifest as crystals represent opposite approach, people choosing to support each other across vast distances despite having nothing to personally gain from doing so. This collective strength, powered by care and hope rather than hatred, proves more powerful than individual might because it taps into fundamental human capacity for connection that transcends mere capability. The game's treatment of death as significant, but not always final, walks interesting line between consequence and hope. Characters who die remain dead long enough for their loss to impact the narrative and other characters, preventing their deaths from feeling cheap or meaningless. Yet several later return alive through various means, suggesting that even apparent endings might have unexpected continuations. This could undermine death's impact, but it also reflects the theme of resilience and unexpected possibilities that runs throughout the story. Yang, surviving the Tower of Babel's collapse, through combination of his incredible physical conditioning and being found by dwarves, demonstrates that even hopeless situations might have solutions if enough factors align favorably. The twins, being freed from petrification through magical research that the Elder of Mysidia conducts, shows that problems without immediate solutions might become solvable with time and sustained effort. The musical score's role in creating emotional resonance cannot be overstated. Nobuo Uematsu's compositions enhance every aspect of the experience, from the militaristic march of the Red Wings theme, to the melancholy beauty of Rosa's theme, to the epic confrontation implied by Golbez's theme, to the cosmic scope of the final battle music. These themes become associated with specific characters and moments, their melodies evoking memories and emotions long after playing. The music serves as emotional shorthand, allowing players to immediately connect with tone and feeling of each scene through familiar themes, whose significance has been established through repeated association. The relationship between gameplay and narrative creates integration where mechanical progression mirrors character development. Cecil's transformation from Dark Knight to Paladin changes his abilities completely, requiring players to adapt their strategies just as Cecil adapts his worldview. Rydia's growth from child to adult in the Feymark results in her returning with vastly expanded magical capabilities, the gameplay change reflecting narrative transformation. Characters joining and leaving the party as story demands, rather than based purely on gameplay optimization, reinforces that these are people with their own motivations and circumstances, rather than tools existing solely for player convenience. This integration of mechanics and narrative creates more cohesive experience than approaches that treat gameplay and story as entirely separate concerns. The game's relatively short length compared to modern RPGs feels like feature rather than limitation, allowing it to maintain narrative momentum without padding or filler. The story moves from crisis to crisis without extended periods of grinding or backtracking, each major plot point following naturally from what preceded it. This pacing keeps players engaged with narrative rather than forgetting story beats between lengthy gameplay sequences. the focused experience respects player time, while delivering complete character arcs and thematic exploration, demonstrating that epic scope does not require 100-hour playtimes when story is well structured and efficiently told. The impact on Final Fantasy series itself established many elements that would become franchise hallmarks. The emphasis on crystals as important plot elements, the use of dragoons and other iconic job classes, the combination of fantasy and science fiction elements, the focus on personal relationships within larger conflicts, all appeared in Final Fantasy IV and influenced subsequent entries. The game marked shift toward more character-driven narratives in series, moving away from more generic player-insert protagonists toward specific characters with defined personalities and histories. This evolution would continue through later entries, each building on foundations that Final Fantasy IV established. The critical and commercial success demonstrated that there was substantial audience for story-focused RPGs on consoles, helping secure future for genre in market that might have otherwise remained dominated by action and arcade-style games. The game sold exceptionally well and received praise from critics and players for its narrative ambition and emotional resonance. This success encouraged both Square and other developers to invest in similar projects, leading to a renaissance of story-driven RPGs in mid to late 1990s that produced some of gaming's most beloved titles. As we reach the conclusion of Cecil's journey, standing with him and Rosa on Baron Castle's balcony as they look toward future filled with both promise and challenge, we are reminded that the greatest stories are not those where heroes simply defeat villains and live happily ever after. The greatest stories are those that acknowledge complexity, that understand people are capable of both terrible harm and genuine growth, that recognize redemption requires more than single dramatic gesture, but sustained effort over time. Final Fantasy IV tells such a story, giving us characters who fail and struggle and make mistakes, but ultimately choose to become better versions of themselves. Cecil's transformation from Dark Knight to Paladin is complete, not when he descends from Mount Ordeals with new powers, but when he stands at his wedding having earned the trust and respect of people he once wronged. His journey from following orders without question to leading a kingdom with moral clarity reflects the kind of growth that matters most, internal change that manifests in external actions. He becomes worthy of the title hero not through inherent virtue, but through choices made when confronted with his own capacity for causing harm. He chooses light, not because darkness was never an option, but precisely because he knows darkness intimately and consciously rejects it in favor of something better. The world Cecil helped save is not perfect or free from conflict, but it is a world where hope exists and where people can work together across differences to oppose threats that no individual or kingdom could face alone. The connections forged during the journey, the friendships and alliances built through shared struggle, demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength lies not in individual power, but in collective action, rooted in mutual support and care. When Zemus's pure hatred falls before the combined prayers of everyone Cecil helped, it proves that love and connection are not weaknesses to be exploited, but forces more powerful than any magic or technology. This is the complete story of Final Fantasy IV, a tale of redemption earned through painful self-examination and sustained effort to become worthy of the forgiveness offered by those we have harmed. It is a story about the courage required to question authority when orders conflict with conscience, about choosing to change rather than remaining trapped by guilt over past actions. It is about family, both biological and chosen, about how the deepest bonds form between people who select each other and commit to mutual support through challenges that test their connection. It is about the balance between power and wisdom, about understanding that capability alone does not grant moral authority to control others. It is about hope persisting even in darkest moments, about unexpected second chances, and the possibility that apparent endings might actually be transitions to new beginnings. The legacy of this story extends far beyond the game itself, influencing countless titles that followed and introducing millions of players to the possibility that games could tell stories as emotionally sophisticated as those found in any medium. Its themes remain relevant decades after initial release because they speak to universal human experiences of guilt and redemption, of questioning ourselves and choosing to grow, of finding strength through connection with others who share our struggles. The characters live on in memory long after the final scene fades, their journeys resonating because they reflect our own challenges and aspirations. As the screen fades to black and the credits roll over Nobuo Uematsu's soaring final theme, we are left with the image of Cecil and Rosa standing together, ready to face whatever comes next, with the support of friends scattered across two worlds who believe in them and in the possibility of building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. The moon hangs above them, visible and hidden simultaneously, symbol of both danger overcome and potential that awaits when humanity is ready to meet it. Golbez watches from that lunar sanctuary, beginning his own long journey of atonement and healing. Kain walks roads that will take him far from Baron as he seeks to forgive himself for actions committed under another's control. Each person who joined this fight or supported it from afar continues their own story. And while we do not see these futures unfold, we trust they will build the world that Zemus's hatred failed to destroy. This is how legends are born, not from tales of perfect heroes who never falter, but from stories of flawed people who choose to become better when confronted with the weight of their mistakes. This is how worlds are saved, not through individual might alone, but through collective effort and the willingness to support each other across differences that might otherwise divide. This is the complete story of Final Fantasy IV, and it endures because it understands that the greatest victory is not defeating external enemies, but overcoming the darkness within ourselves and choosing again and again to walk in the light. If you've enjoyed this deep exploration of one of gaming's most beloved stories, I invite you to continue this journey with me. Share your own memories and connections to this tale in the comments below, and consider subscribing to join future explorations of the forgotten corners and beloved classics that have shaped our understanding of what interactive storytelling can achieve. Until next time, may you find the courage to question, the strength to change, and the wisdom to recognize that redemption is always possible for those willing to walk the difficult path toward becoming something better than what they were.